Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. Today, we're going to do a technical analysis series where we highlight different studies and strategies of the TradeStation platform. And today, we're going to talk about DMI, the Directional Movement Index. Let me see if I can get this PowerPoint started. Here we go. All right. The title of the presentation is Measure Trend Strength using the Directional Movement Index. So yes, we're going to dive deeper into the technicalities of DMI and how it's calculated, maybe look at some custom variations of the study to provide us with a different visual, and maybe work a little bit with the strategy to see what type of results we can get out of the DMI. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. For me, it's always a pleasure to be here talking to you about the TradeStation technology. So let's use this opportunity to answer any questions you may have. Let's go through some of the disclosures of this class. Keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, that active trading is not suitable for everyone, and past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. For additional information, visit www.tradestation.com/important-information. But let's define the Directional Movement Index. As I said before, this is known as the DMI. It was developed by Wilder in the 1970s and is made up of three different indicators. When you put it on the TradeStation chart, you're going to see three separate lines: the DMI plus, the DMI minus, and the ADX. They all make up the Directional Movement Index. Let's try to understand each one of the lines, see what the indicator is trying to tell us, and see how we can take advantage of some of its signals. When the DMI plus is above the DMI minus, and the ADX has a reading of 25 or higher, the current price momentum is said to be up and indicating a strong uptrend. Now, this is based on the definition of the DMI on the TradeStation platform. These are based on some of the alert settings that are pre-programmed on the indicator. You may find that some other parameters work better depending on the type of market you're following, maybe the type of or the symbol that you're following. The reading of 25 here is very arbitrary, and it may change. And when I talk about technical analysis, I want everyone to look at these studies parameters as a way of testing different scenarios and see if it still stands true. Is 25 a good reading for this indicator? Because 25 is the default value for the alert instead of the DMI, but maybe you get better results using a lower number or a higher number. And that's where TradeStation really shines, because you can use the technology that we have inside of the TradeStation platform to test all these different scenarios. But this is a bullish signal. So the DMI plus is above the DMI minus, and the ADX has a reading higher of 25. And the opposite is when the DMI minus is above the DMI plus, and the ADX has a reading of 25 or higher. It's said to be down and indicating a strong downtrend. Notice the ADX value. The ADX value does not change. We're looking for a reading of 25 or higher. ADX is a type of indicator that measures the strength of a particular trend and not necessarily direction. Let's dive deeper into the calculation of each one of these lines so that we can understand them a little bit better. The intention here is not to make everyone here an expert in math, but as I say in a lot of my technical analysis classes, once you understand the mechanics and the insides of any technical indicator, it gives you an edge, because you know exactly where the values are coming from and what those values are exactly measuring on the chart. So we already said that ADX measures the strength of a prevailing trend. When you have ADX values that are low, it indicates a non-trending market with low volatility. ADX is one of those nice indicators that tells you, if you're actually in a trend, not necessarily in which direction the prices are going, but whenever the prices are moving, ADX is going to move along with those movements. When you have ADX values are kind of low, then it just means that the market's not moving. It may be consolidating. It may be moving sideways. Whenever you have ADX conditions that are low, just pay attention because the price will eventually break into a trend. And this happens many times. When you are able to identify consolidation periods and the price is trading within a channel, then it's very likely for the prices to break either to the upside or to the downside. So the ADX is one of those indicators that allows you to identify those low volatility periods when the markets are not moving. Whenever you see a cross above 25, and we already talked about that 25 is it's a number that is the default parameter of the DMI indicator, not necessarily something that works all the time. But whenever you have a cross of the ADX above 25, it may indicate the start of a trend. I'm going to show you the ADX on a chart and maybe some ways in which you can identify values that are more suitable for the symbol that you're looking at, because maybe 25 is a little higher or a little high for some markets that you're following. When the ADX line is rising, trend strength is increasing, and the price is expected to move in the direction of the trend. So not only we're looking at the value of the ADX, we're also looking at where the ADX line is going. So we're going to look at things as slope, like for example, drawing a trend line to see what the direction of that ADX line is. So some of those types of analysis can help you also determine if the trend is strengthening or not. If you have an ADX that is high, here we mentioned a value of 40 and the ADX values begin to fall, it can indicate the slowdown of a current trend. So not only we're looking for that crossover above 25, we're also looking at declining ADX values because it also tells you that the trend that you may be following has lost some steam and there may be a reversal coming up. The ADX is not a directional indicator, so it's not going to tell you if it's bullish or if it's bearish. It just looks at the prices that are being measured and telling you if there's movement or not. Whenever there's consolidation or the prices are moving sideways, you get low ADX values. And whenever you have trends developing, the ADX then is going to provide you with higher numbers. Calculation-wise, as I said at the beginning, the intention here is not to make you mathematicians, but I like to look at the math of indicators. It just gives me an additional understanding, an additional insight into the indicator and what's being measured. But in order for you to calculate the DMI, you need to calculate three things. You need to calculate the true range. A lot of us know what true range is, high, low, and the distance between the high and the low. The true range is called true range because sometimes there are gaps. That gap must be counted as range, and that's why it's called true range. But we also need to calculate DMI and DMI plus and DMI minus. There's two specific formulas for those two lines. Let me put them up here on the screen. The way that the DMI plus and the DMI minus are calculated is looking at the difference between the high and the high of the previous bar and the low of the previous bar. So it looks at price change between those two data points, high to high and low to low. And it determines which one of the two had the higher movement. And it's going to create two buckets, one bucket for the DMI plus and another bucket for the DMI minus. Whichever one wins this competition, I call it a competition because you are always on every single bar, you're comparing, the movement from high to high and then movement from low to low. If the high to high was bigger than the low to low, then that difference is added to the DMI plus. It's like, okay, we give the point to the DMI plus because there's a one that won this contest in that single bar. Then it goes to the next bar and compares the difference between high and high, low and low, and determines which one's biggest. If the difference between the low of the previous bar and the low of this current bar is bigger, it'll assign those points to the DMI minus. And it just goes on in this calculation, and it's going to assign those points to either the DMI plus or the DMI minus. So looking at a chart, if you look at a chart and you see the candlesticks moving up, it's very likely for the difference between the high and the high on all these bars, it's going to be bigger than the difference between the low and the low. So in those scenarios is when the DMI plus is going to increase in values. So if you think about the DMI as a separation between two buckets, and the upward movements and the downward movements are separated and added to a particular bucket, then you can already understand, the relationship between the DMI plus and the DMI minus. There's a lot of calculations here, and this is just a summary of what is seen in the easy language code. For those of you that like to dive deeper into the math of these indicators, I think it's something that everyone should do. Not to, know exactly how these are calculated, but just have an understanding of what is it that it's being measured. Then we take, the smoothing technique designed by Wells Wilder, applies it to these three different lines. This is the formula, or the final formula, for the DMI plus and the DMI minus. And that's it. That's when you see the three lines on the chart. Let's go here to my TradeStation platform and show you how that indicator looks. Let me open up a new workspace here. Let me open up a chart analysis. This is General Motors. Let me turn this chart into a daily time frame, and we're going to go to studies, add studies. DMI is one of the built-in studies here. Let's go ahead and take a look. Here it is. I'm not going to modify any of the parameters yet. And you can see the three different lines that make up the indicator. We have a blue, a red, and a yellow line. The red is the DMI minus, the blue is the DMI plus, and the yellow is the ADX. How can you tell? If you're on a chart and you're unsure which one's which, click on the background of the chart until you get the data tips window. And if you're on the indicator itself, you can see the indicator values right there at the bottom of this data tips window, and you can tell which one's which. You can see the blue is the DMI plus, the red is the DMI minus, and the ADX is the yellow line. Now, talking about the yellow line for a moment, we said earlier that an ADX reading above 25 means that the price is moving, that the price is trending. We already established that the ADX is not going to tell you the direction in which the prices are moving, but it does tell you the strength at which those prices are moving. I'm going to come here and go to my drawing menu and go to my horizontal line, because I'm going to draw a line here at 25. Okay, let me draw it here at 25. Okay, if you can't really quite reach 25, notice that I reached 25.65. You can always double click on that line and provide it the exact value that you want the line to be on. I'm going to go to the data tab and type in 25 for my horizontal line. And yes, if you didn't know this, you can also draw horizontal lines and trend lines and everything you have in the drawing menu inside of an indicator. So this is a horizontal line on an indicator, and I can see how the ADX relates to that 25 value. If I look at the crossovers, let's take a look at the values here, because for General Motors, there's been significant rallies that I would have expected the ADX to align with them. But take a look at where the 25 is being crossed. Let me see if I can go to my drawing menu and draw an ellipsis. Let me see if I have it here. There we go. I'm going to remain in drawing mode for a moment, drawing, and go to ellipse. I'm going to draw, circles around the areas where that 25 is crossed. Okay, these are some of the areas. These are not every single one, but some of the areas. I just want to see if it's a good value or not. This allows me to look at all those different values. Let me go back to drawing and check remain in drawing mode. I don't need it anymore. All right, and let's take a look at this one. The ADX dropped below 25. And for General Motors, it didn't actually mean that General Motors was going to go into a consolidation period, the opposite actually happened. You see the General Motors prices continuing on this downtrend. So a drop on this particular ADX value below the 25 threshold did not mean a sideways movement for General Motors. Take a look at this area right here. This is a crossover over 25. General Motors had been in a trend weeks before the value here crossed above 25. So that's when I said, yeah, the 25 value is a default parameter that is built into the indicator. When you look at the details and the way that the price activity is moving in relationship to the indicator, then you start second guessing that 25. Maybe the 25 is not such a good value for General Motors. And you're going to see this consistently in different markets. Let me go ahead and remove those ellipses. I'm going to go here to the drawing menu, remove drawing objects. Let me remove everything here, ellipses and horizontal lines. So if I were to drop that line, and maybe if I look at all the bottoms here, and I make and I draw more of a visual line around 16 or 15. I'm going to go here to the drawing menu, horizontal line, drawing. I click on vertical, horizontal line, and let's click here around 16. This is 1664. Let me go ahead and change that to just plain 16. And I'm going to go to drawing, remain in drawing mode, drawing, and then click on the ellipses one more time. Now, if I look at the crossovers, let's look at this one right here. And I'll look at this one right here. Maybe this one right here. All right. Let me remove drawing mode. And maybe this last one. Okay, so it may not be perfect, but now if I click on or hover over these ellipses, I can see that, for example, in this area, General Motor stopped going down. It hit a support level. You can see that. And the price is kind of bounced back on that support level. But when, it's like a consolidation period here. When the prices over here, crossed above 25, we can see that the trend was identified a little bit sooner than if we had used 25. The same happens right here. Notice how we went lower than 25 and above 25. And this would have been, a nice way of entering this movement for General Motors because it identified the trend a little bit sooner than the 25. So that's when I tell you that the 25 is a default value and that you can use TradeStation to do some additional testing, some additional analysis to identify what would be the best parameter for this particular market. You can see that for General Motors, for example, 25 was a little bit too high. Maybe a 16 or 15 would have given me better results at identifying the beginning of these trends. Just some ideas to think about. Let me go ahead and remove my drawing objects. All right, let me go back here into my PowerPoint. This goes a little bit more into detail about the math of the lines. In order for you to calculate ADX, which is the yellow line of the DMI, and is the one that tells you if the strength or if the trend is strong or not, you need to calculate DX. DX stands for directional movement, and it tells you the formula here is the absolute value of the DMI plus minus the DMI minus divided by the sum of the DMI plus and the DMI minus, and then multiplied by 100. You don't need to learn the math. It's just here for you to have just a little bit of understanding of what's happening to those lines. The first value of ADX is an average of DX over a specified period. And then the following values are smoothed by multiplying the previous ADX value by the specified period minus 1, adding the current ADX value, and dividing this total by the specified period. Here, not for you to memorize this. If you ask me tomorrow how the lines are calculated, I'm not going to be able to remember the math. But it's here for you to understand where the values come from. I think that if you're going to use the DMI as a technical study in which you're going to base your trading decisions, you got to understand, where the values are coming from and what's happening, and how you can interpret some of the movements of those values. Some of the trading observations, we're going to go through some of these items, and then we're going to jump over to the TradeStation workspace and the custom study that I'm supplying with the class today. Trading signal, DMI plus crosses over DMI minus, indicates a bullish signal. DMI plus crossing below the DMI minus indicates a bearish signal. We're going to take a look at that. I think there's a built-in strategy on TradeStation that does that exactly. ADX helps identify the strength of the trend, not the direction. And traders may use the slope of ADX. An ADX value greater than 25 may imply a strengthening trend. Again, question marks or quotation marks around that 25 because it may change depending on the symbol that you're watching. The DMI and the DMI minus may move away from each other when price volatility increases, and they may converge towards each other when volatility decreases. So those are some of the ideas that we are going to talk about today in a practical form. So let's go ahead and jump over to my TradeStation platform to take a look. Yeah, this is the end of that PowerPoint slide. Everyone has the PDF as well. This DMI indicator is the original DMI view. And if you look at the lines, they're a little bit noisy because there's a lot of static. There's a lot of jumping up and down. There's a lot of red, blue, and yellow all mixed together. And the original view of the DMI indicator is not very easy to interpret. There's no clear view of where the trend is. And if it's bullish, if it's bearish, you'd have to come over here, the very end, even here at the very end. We recently had a crossover, and you can see how the blue is above the red and the yellow is somewhere in the middle, but it's hard to see. So there's different variations of the way that the DMI can be put on a chart. If I go to studies here on my TradeStation chart and I click on Add Study, you have the DMI original indicator, and then you have the DMI oscillator, which is similar to the DMI, it's just a different visual. Let me go ahead and put it on the screen so you guys can see it. And what it does, it's going to take the DMI plus and the DMI minus and just plot the difference. You guys see the green and the red histogram? That is just the difference between the DMI plus and the DMI minus. These two indicators may not align at first because they use different parameters. Like, for example, sometimes, these kind of align very nicely, but the parameters are going to be different. If I go to the inputs of the original DMI, you can see how the length of the DMI is 14, and then it has an ADX trend at 25. That's the threshold of the 25 we talked about. If I go to the settings here on this DMI oscillator, you have the DMI length, which is set to 10. That's like 4 points lower. So if I set it to 14, they'll be aligned better. Here, you have the ability to show a moving average. Set to 1. You can change it to 2 if you don't, or 0. Yeah, you enter 0 if you don't want to see the moving average. That's that yellow or orangey line that goes through it. It's just an average of the DMI difference. This is the average length. And then you have overbought and oversold levels that you can also plot on the graph. Those are those horizontal green lines that you see right there on the chart. So it does provide you a different visual of the DMI. Whenever the DMI plus is above the DMI minus, then the histogram is green, and you can see that it's above 0. And whenever the DMI minus is above the DMI plus, like for example in this area, you can see how the histogram is red and is pointing downward. I feel like this DMI oscillator view provides you a little bit more understanding of if the indicator is bearish or bullish. And some of the movement here does align pretty nicely with what's happening here on the candles. Whenever you have very visual uptrends, you can see how the DMI indicator is on the positive side. Right here, we had a sort of a consolidation period. It wasn't really clear on the DMI, but we could have looked at the ADX. One thing that the DMI oscillator indicator doesn't do, which is this indicator at the bottom, it doesn't give us the ADX value. The ADX value is something that is really nice to take a look at because it does tell you if the prices are trending. Not only if you have a bullish or a bearish mode based on the crossover, is tell me if there's actual movement in the price, because those are the movements is what pretty much everyone's looking for in a trending strategy. Let me remove the DMI original indicator and apply the one that I provided here as a custom study. But he's going to share a link to a zip folder that has a custom study, and it also has a custom workspace. The custom study has an extension ELD. And in order for you to open up the workspace, please import the indicator first. You have to import the ELD first. But that's something that you can do very easily. If you have it already saved on your computer, you can double click on the ELD and it'll import the custom studies. And then you can go ahead and open up the workspace that's also inside of that zip folder. But when you import the studies, that study becomes part of the list of studies of your TradeStation. I can click on Studies, Add Studies, and go to the name of the indicator, by the way, starts with an @ symbol and the letters MC for Masterclass. So look for @ and we provide those custom indicators, an @ MC, so that we know that those indicators came from Masterclass. And by having that @ symbol at the very beginning, they get sorted towards the top. So they're not sorted in alphabetical order, mixed in with your TradeStation studies. They're kind of separate because of that, special character. So @MC, and the indicator name is DMI CH, CH for charting. I'm going to click OK and OK. All right, you can see that it's a little bit similar to the DMI oscillator with a slight variation. There's a slight variation, and you can see how the movement of that line, of that the DMI line is a little smoother than over here. The DMI oscillator is just a straight difference between the DMI plus and the DMI minus. So you get a lot of static on the actual histogram. And you can see that some of the histogram bars are bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. So by creating a smoother histogram, it just creates a better visual. How do we create a smoother line here for the DMI? Well, we just apply a simple average. If not sure if you have ability to adjust that average here. Let me go to the inputs of this indicator. One of the things you can change is the DMI length. Notice that it's set to 13. The default parameter on that indicator is 13 because 13 is a Fibonacci number, not for any other particular reason, because the DMI indicator that's default on TradeStation uses 14 instead. Again, the parameter here is open for you to test different scenarios and see which one would have provided you better results. But in addition to, the DMI parameter, you also have arrows. The nice thing about this indicator is that it draws arrows every time that there's a crossover, just for the purpose of enhancing the visual. You can see the crossovers here on the original DMI oscillator, but when you create an indicator that also adds an arrow at the exact point when the crossover happened, it just enhances the visual. And this is the type of indicator that does that, and it allows you to set that arrow to a particular size, style, and color. I'm not going to change those parameters because I'm just going to use the defaults. But what I wanted to show you, though, is the easy language. I'm going to click on Edit Easy Language right here from this dialog because I want to show you how it does the DMI calculation. All right, so this is the easy language of that indicator. And I'm going to compare it to the DMI indicator that comes supplied with TradeStation. Or, yeah, the DMI oscillator indicator. So I'm just clicking on Open. And let me go here to the Ds. I just press the D here on my keyboard, and it scrolls very quickly. And I'm going to choose the DMI oscillator because we already noticed that when we were looking at the two studies, one above the other, they were very similar. I just want to see what the difference is in the plot. So let me scroll down here. And the plot number one is the DMI oscillator value. Everybody sees the name that I highlighted. That's just a custom name. But if we look over here, yeah, this goes a little bit into the easy language. You're going to notice that every time that I do a masterclass, I like to go into the easy language because easy language is very telling as to what is it doing, in terms of plotting values for an indicator. This DMI oscillator value references a function, which is the DMI oscillator. But if I right click and I open up the function, you can see how the function is just this: DMI plus minus DMI minus. The exact mathematical formula we talked about, the difference between those two lines, and that's exactly what's being plotted. On the indicator that I supplied, which is the custom indicator, we do it slightly different. If I scroll down here, see if I find it. There we go. Here's the difference. Notice that DMI plus and DMI minus are inside parentheses, but we're averaging that. There's a 5-period average of that difference. That's what's giving you that smoother line on that indicator. So when we go back to the chart and we compare the two histograms, this one on top is a little bit smoother because it's just averaging the values of that difference for 5 bars, and that's what's being plotted. Which one works better? It's just different variations. We went through 3 different DMI studies: the DMI original, the DMI oscillator, which plots the difference, and then this is another variation on top of that. I want you guys to test these indicators. If this is an idea that you'd want to use to filter stocks by, filter by these different variations to see which one works best in any different situation. These 2 indicators that we're looking at, the DMI oscillator and the @MC DMI charting indicator, are not using ADX. The original DMI had the yellow line, which the ADX, which gives you the strength of the trend. This doesn't take into account that. Of course, we can modify the easy language so that it takes account, so that it accounts for it. But for example, let's go ahead and apply the strategy that is based on this oscillator. I'm going to go here to the studies and click on Add Strategy. There's a strategy that is designed based on that DMI oscillator. And here it is, the DMI oscillator LESE. Let me put the 2 strategies in, short entry and long entry. I'm going to click OK. Let me remove this indicator, which is the custom one that I provided everyone here in class. And let's just focus on the one that's built in. This is the DMI oscillator. And you can see that every time that there's a crossover on that histogram, I'm getting signals. I'm getting a bullish signal, which is the blue arrow, whenever there's a crossover to the top side. And I'm getting a red arrow whenever there's a short entry because the histogram has crossed to the negative side. Now, if I squeeze the chart a little bit more, all right, this is a chart, a daily chart of General Motors that goes back 2 years. If I go to the Data tab and I go and click on Strategy Performance Report, then you can see the report of this particular strategy out of the box. You can see that we had 41 trades in a period of 2 years, and the results were not that bad. I want to say not that bad because I've been testing the DMI strategy for some time already, and it's hard to find a symbol that actually works with the signals of the DMI. And we're going to take a look at that also here on this workspace that I provided to you. But I wanted just to make you aware that there is a DMI strategy that is built into the TradeStation platform. If I right-click on any of these signals, let me right-click on the blue signal and go to Edit Easy Language for Strategy. Let me click on this DMI Oscillator LE. This is the long entry. This is going to open up the easy language for the strategy. But if I look at the bottom where the buy order is generated, notice that line 29 is where the buy order is generated, buy next barred market. And the condition is when the DMI oscillator value crosses over the trigger level. What is the trigger level? If you look up here, the trigger level is 0. So whenever there is a crossover 0, then the strategy is going to buy. Again, this strategy makes no reference to ADX as the original DMI indicator does. Remember that the DMI indicator has this yellow line, which is the ADX, that measures the strength of the trend. And it also bases the alert trigger on what the ADX is doing. Is it above 25? Is it below 25? So a lot of times when you use trending strategies, like in this case, the DMI oscillator, maybe it makes sense to reference the ADX to see if it's moving. If the ADX values are too low, maybe, the symbol is still in a consolidation period. Maybe the symbol is still moving sideways and there's no trend visible. I'm just saying may and could because every symbol is going to be different. But the idea of incorporating ADX into a strategy like the DMI just makes sense. On the workspace that I provided everyone here, which is named @MC DMI, you find the chart with the strategy already applied and the custom indicator. It has all these other studies. This is something that I didn't realize that I had saved into the workspace when I copied it into the zip folder, but you're going to find all these other indicators that you can leave there or not. If they clutter your space, just click on them and remove them. For example, here, the ADX at the bottom. Maybe I want to leave it here for a moment, because if I remove the ADX or the DMI or the original DMI, I'm losing the ADX value. The DMI oscillator here, let me remove that, and I'll leave the custom one and the ADX value. This ADX, by the way, the ADX indicator that's at the bottom, this is something that's built into the TradeStation platform. And you can see that this particular indicator uses 20 as the threshold for the movement, the strength movement. Of course, you can lower that, you can raise that depending on what symbol you are evaluating. One thing that I wanted to show you is this RadarScreen here on the left-hand side. RadarScreen is a type of application that's going to help you identify symbols that are kind of showing signals for the DMI or any other study for that matter. I see, John, that you're not seeing the workspace. It's in the zip folder. There is a link that Manolo shared just a moment ago. Manolo, if you can share it again. The zip folder is something you'd have to extract the contents of. There's an ELD file in there and there's a TSW file in there. So there's two things. There's the custom indicator and there's the workspace. Make sure that you import the indicator first before you open up the workspace. But here inside of RadarScreen, we have this column called the @MC DMI RS. This is an indicator that is specifically designed for RS. That's why it says RS in the name of it. It's RS for RadarScreen. But it also separates the columns, letting you know if the stock is in a bullish or a bearish mode, if there is an alert triggered right now, and how many bars ago the indicator crossed. Because that may be something interesting to look at. When you look at a stock that hasn't shown a crossover in a long time, for example, take a look at General Motors. Not until recently, a few days ago, we see some activity happening. But before that, when this trend started back in November and the prices started going up, you can see how the DMI was mainly positive. All of a sudden, we see a crossover, something happening right now. Of course, there's a huge gap today that throws the indicator off. We were kind of, going into the negative side, and General Motors were showing signs of being bearish, but all of a sudden we have this huge gap that threw the indicator back onto the positive side. So is this maybe a good trading signal? I'm not sure. Now, whenever there's a gap like that, we're not really sure what's going to happen to General Motors. Is it going to close the gap? Is it going to be a runner and start, heading upward? There's a lot of things that could happen, but you can see how this indicator today gave us this alert that it was crossing to the upside. We can see how the symbol works with a strategy. I'm not going to take a look at it right now because we already looked at it, but I was saying that it's interesting to look at stocks that haven't crossed in a while because maybe they're due for something different to happen to them. So if I double click on bars ago, notice that all the ones that have a bullish signal or bearish signal will have a 0 because it's happening right now. We have a bearish signal here for Intel. So if I go to Intel, you can see that this security has been consistently on the positive side based on the DMI, and right now it's crossing to the downside. Is this an indication that prices will go down? Thus, again, still to evaluate, still for you to analyze and make a decision. But if I double click on bars ago one more time, it's going to sort by the number of bars ago that the crossover happened. And if you look at this symbol right here, TME, the company's Transcend Music Entertainment, if I click on it, you can see how the stock for several months has been on the positive side. Of course, I'm not trying to say anything here, but you can see that it hasn't crossed in a while. And so the odds of it crossing may be different than somebody or a stock that's been, crossing up and down. So a lot of these stocks, if you sort them by bars ago, you can see the stocks that haven't crossed or shown any difference in their price movement for some time already. Verizon is another stock that has been on the positive side, even though we did see some corrections. And notice that in these corrections, what the DMI does, it actually, drops in value. You can see that there's a slope that's going down. That's very telling too, because we talked about slope. Whenever you see high DMI values and all of a sudden they start going down, is because there may be a reversal kind of signaling, or maybe the trend is losing some of its steam. Do you guys see the difference between the teal color here or the blue? One is brighter than the other. The same happens here on the magenta. One of the colors is stronger than the other. It's because it kind of loses its brightness whenever it starts going down or up. So whenever you have these darker blue, it just means that the value is decreasing. And the same happens here on the magenta. When you see the values going up, it's because the trend may be shifting and changing direction. So those are things that you have to pay attention to, not only whether the indicator is showing positive or negative, but also where the values of that indicator are headed. Are they going down? Are they going up? Are they static? Are they going sideways? So there's a lot of information that is provided by these studies. But the RSI, I'm sorry, not the RSI, the RadarScreen indicator is one that allows you to filter stocks and find things that are happening right now. If I sort by alert, I can see that there's 9 different symbols that are triggering the DMI alert as we speak. If we take a look at Intel, which we talked about in just a moment, notice that it's triggering the bearish alert on that DMI. If you look at the ADX value, the ADX value is around around 22.99. Everybody sees the ADX value down here. Historically, Intel has been very low on the ADX in relationship to its peaks I'm talking about. So maybe the threshold of 20, it's still a little high. Yes, there's been some downward movement recently for Intel. We can see how the ADX has turned down a little bit, but notice what's happening to that ADX line. It's kind of turning up, right? I see that there's a turning up on that ADX, not implying that the bearish signal is not as strong, but it's something that helps you determine whether this bearish signal is strong enough. So those are some of the things that I would want to look at if I'm looking at the DMI as an indicator that I'm basing my decisions on. But this RadarScreen, this section that's called big volume value stocks, this section right here, I update periodically because the symbols are going to be different. And they're based on a scan that TradeStation has also available in the scanner, something that anyone here can utilize. The way that I search for these big volume value stocks is by using the scanner. I go to apps, I click on the scanner. All right, let me open up my scanner here a little bit. I may have, many more scans that you do, or less than you do if you're using scanner a lot. But there's a scan here called, here we go, big volume value stocks. This is built into TradeStation. If you go to settings and you click on sample scans, you're going to find, is it here? I thought it was here, but maybe not. I'm not seeing it anymore. Big movers. We have strong growth, cheap stocks with big returns, growth at a reasonable price, cash rich. Maybe it's a custom scan, but if I look at the criteria, this is very simple. It's looking for stocks that have a volume average greater than 10. Is this a million? Yeah, this is not a million. Yeah, it is a million. Greater than 1 million. Is it 1 million or 10 million? It's 10 million. Okay, so I'm looking for stocks that have a volume average greater than 10 million shares. It's hard to see the zeros when there are no commas. And I'm also looking for a market cap greater than 1,000. That's a simple scan, looking for those stocks, and I run it. It looks for the stocks. It finds them. Notice how the volume here is greater than 10 million and the market cap is greater than 1,000. And what I do is I click on the very first one just to highlight it. I scroll all the way down. There's 124 different symbols. I hold on my shift key and then I click on the last one. This highlights the whole column of symbols. I right click, copy, and then I go to my radar screen and I paste them right in here. Let me delete the ones that are there. All right, so when I right click on the very first empty row, I can go to paste and it's going to paste all those 124 symbols that I found in RadarScreen, and it'll calculate my DMI indicator in real time. I can sort by the alert and see all the ones that are triggering the alert right now. So this is a very quick way for you to find these very liquid stocks that have good value and that are showing you a signal on any indicator. In this case, the DMI crossover. But that's my class today. I wanted to show you all the different tools that you have available in order for you to analyze the DMI values. Oh, by the way, the strategy that I have here on the chart, I can quickly go to data and load up the strategy performance report. Now, by having the strategy performance report here visible, I'm able to click on the symbols here on my radar screen and see which one provides good results by following the DMI signals. For example, if I click on VP, notice how the strategy did not perform well. But if I click on General Motors, GM, that's the strategy that we looked at earlier. It seems to work fine for General Motors. If I click on Oxy, that's another symbol that doesn't really work well with the DMI strategy. It doesn't work well with the parameters that I have here on the screen, because that's another thing. I'm standing here, or sitting, because I'm sitting. I'm sitting here and telling you, hey, the DMI didn't work well for this particular symbol, but what about tweaking the indicator a little bit? I know that we're using 14 bars in the calculation of the DMI. Have we thought about maybe changing that parameter and make it a little bit shorter, or maybe making it a little bit longer? Would that give us better results? With TradeStation, you have this technology that allows you to do that type of calculation and that type of studies. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you have any questions about some of the supplemental materials that we provided here in class, please send us an email, education@tradestation.com. Manolo's going to share that email address right here in the chat. So guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you again in one of my future classes. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.